Morning, everyone. So we are on to chapter 3 of Florence Nightingale's story, The Angel of the Crimea. This is chapter 3, The Squire's Daughter. It soon became a recognised thing in Florence's own home and in all of the neighbourhood that she was one of the Sisters of Mercy. Nothing was too small, no creature too humble to awaken her sympathy and tenderness. When the stable cat had kittens, Florence was the first to visit them, to fondle the tiny creatures and soothe their mother's angry fear. When she walked along the pleasant wood roads of Lea Hurst, the squirrels expected nuts as a matter of course, and could hardly wait for her to give them. When anyone in the village or farm fell ill, it was Florence who was looked for cheer and comfort. Mrs. Nightingale was a most kind and charitable lady, and delighted in sending food for the sick. It was Florence's happy privilege to carry them, and whether she walked or rode her horse, there was apt to be a basket on her arm or fastened to her saddle. If you think hard, you can see, or at least I can, just how it would be. Old Dr. Goody's rheumatism, let us say, was a very bad one morning. You children who read this know little about rheumatism. Very likely you think it rather a funny word, and that it's just a thing that old people have, and they could make a great deal of fuss about, a little bit like arthritis. If it were toothache, you would say that's pain, but it's not very pleasant. If a red-hot sword were run into your back, you would not like it, and sometimes it can feel like that. So Dr. Goody's suffering and is very cross, and nothing suited, just couldn't get settled. Her tea is too hot, her porridge too cold, her pillow is not right, and just wishes wasn't here. So Martha, the good patient daughter, was at her wit's end. Send for Miss Florence, she'll do something for me, I know she will, said Dr. Goody one day. So a barefoot boy would trudge up to the great house, and soon a light, slight figure would come quickly along the village street and enter the cottage. A slender girl, quietly dressed, with perfect neatness and taste, brown hair smoothly parted, shining like satin, grey-blue eyes full of light and thoughtfulness, regular features, an oval face, cheeks faintly tinted with rose. This was Florence Nightingale. I can't tell you what she had in the little basket on her arm, whether it was jam or soup or chicken or oranges, but there was sure to be something good beside the ointment and medicines to help the aching back and limbs. But the basket held the least of what she brought. The very sound of her voice, the fretful lines melted away from the poor old face of the people they were there to serve. I can't tell you, I wish I could, the words that she said, this little sister of mercy. Yet I can almost hear her speak in that sweet, cordial voice whose range held no harsh note. Can see her setting the pillow straight and smooth, making the little tray pretty with flowers she had brought, coaxing the old person to eat, making her laugh over some stories of her pets and their funny ways. Perhaps before leaving she would open the Bible or prayer book she'd brought and read a psalm. Can you not see her sitting by the bedside, her pretty head bent over a book, her face full of tenderness and reverence? I'm sure that when she went away there was peace and comfort in that cottage room, and that heartfelt blessings followed the angel child, as she'd become known, as she went on her homeward way. She had a way with her, they used to say, and that meant more than volumes of praise. The flowers that Florence used to carry were from her own garden. Both at Lea Hurst and Embley, she and her sister had each their own little garden and gardening tools. Florence was a good gardener. I think she was good at everything that she tried to be, because she just tried. She dug and sowed and watered, pruned and tied up, and did all the things a garden needs. And so her garden was full of flowers all summer long, giving delight to her and to every sick or lonely, sorrowful person for miles around. As Florence and her sister grew older, they became more and more helpful to the parents in the good works that they both loved to carry on. The author says here that she's read a delightful account of each of the feast days of the village school children as it used to be given at Lea Hurst when Florence was a girl. The children were gathered together at the schoolhouse, all in their best frocks and pinafores, walked in procession up to the school street and through the fields to Lea Hurst. Each child carried a posy and stick wreathed with flowers, and at the head of the procession marched a band of music provided by the good squire. In the field below the garden tables were set, and here Mrs. Nightingale and her daughters helped by their servants, served tea and buns and cakes, waiting on the little guests and seeing that every child got all he wanted, or at least all that was good for them. When they had all eaten and drunk their fill, the band started playing, and the boys and girls danced on their green to the heart's content. What did they dance? Polkas, perhaps, and the redowa, a pretty round dance with a good deal of stamping in it, and of course Sir Roger de Coverley, which is very like our own Virginia reel. If you do not know about Sir Roger de Coverley himself, ask Papa to tell you or read you about him, for he's one of the pleasantest persons you will ever know. I'll have to look that up for you because I don't know what that is either. Perhaps they sang too. Perhaps they sang the pretty old Maypole song. Do you know it? I don't know either, and as luck would have it, it's written here, which means the singing has to start, and I'm very sorry. Oh, come, lasses and lads, get leave of your dads, and away to the Maypole High, for every fair has a sweetheart there, and the fiddler standing by. For Willie shall dance with Jane, and Johnny has got his Joan, to trip it, to trip it, to trip it, to trip it, to trip it up and down. You're out, says Dick. Not I, says Nick. 'Twas the fiddler played it wrong. 'Tis true, said Hugh, and so says Sue, and so says everyone. The fiddler then began to play the tune again, and every girl did trip it, trip it, trip it to the men. Well, that doesn't rhyme at the end, does it? Then, when feast and dance and song were all over, it was time to reform the procession and take up the homeward march. The two sisters, Florence and Parthe, had disappeared during the dancing. But now as the procession passed along the terrace, there they were, standing beside a long table, a table at sight of which the children's eyes grew round and bright, for it was covered from one end to the other with presents. Such delightful presents! Books in pretty boxes and baskets, thimble cases, needle books, pin cushions, dolls for little ones, and scrapbooks. But you can fill up the list for yourselves with everything you like best in the way of pretty, simple gifts. I'm quite sure that Florence would not have wished to give the children foolish or elaborate crackers, and that Mr. Nightingale would have never allowed it if she had. And I think it probable that many of the gifts were made by the two sisters and their kind and clever mother. All about Lea Hurst, in many and many a pleasant cottage home, those little gifts are treasured today, like relics of some blessed saint, which indeed is just what they are. The saint is still living. Remember, this book is written in 1913. And some of the children of the school feasts are living too, and now in their age will show with pride and joy the gifts they received long ago from the hands of the beloved Miss Florence Nightingale. As Florence grew up to womanhood, she found more and more work to do. There were mills and factories in the neighbourhood of Lea Hurst, and in the hosiery mills, especially hundreds of women and girls were employed, many of whom had lived on the Nightingale estate. She may have been 17 or 18 when she started her Bible class for the young women of the district, holding it in the tiny ancient chapel at Lea Hurst, which I described in the first chapter. Gathering the girls around her, she would read a chapter from the Bible and then give them her thoughts about it, and explain difficult passages. Then they would all sing together, her sweet, clear voice leading the hymns. Here is another memory very precious to the old women who were once those happy girls. They loved to tell how beautifully Miss Florence used to talk. Long years after, when Miss Nightingale, spent with her noble labours, would come to Lea Hurst for a time of rest and refreshment, the daughters of these girls counted it a high privilege to gather on the lawn under the window and sing to her as she sat in the room above, and would go home proud and happy as queens if they had seen the saintly face smiling from the window. Shall I try to show you Florence Nightingale at 17? Her face was little changed from that of the girl we saw in the cottage cheering old Dr. Brown. She still wore her hair brushed smoothly, Madonna-wise. That's Madonna, the Virgin Mary Madonna, not the pop star. On either side of her face. Often now she wore a rose at the side, tucked in among the shining braids or coils. You would think her frocks very queer if you saw them today, but then they were extremely pretty, full skirts and full sleeves with broad flat collar of lace or embroidery. When she went to church or to make visits, she wore a spencer, a kind of full-plated jacket with a belt. You have seen pictures of leghorn bonnets of the 30s and 40s. Some people called them, and they were something the shape of a coal scuttle. Some of them were enormous in size, and they look queer now in the pictures, or if your grandma had a way of keeping things, in the dress-up trunk, or cupboard in the attic. But people who were young in those days tell me they were extremely becoming, and that a pretty face never looked prettier than when it peeped out from the depths of a huge straw coal scuttle. So they're the bonnets that really stuck forward that we'll have seen in the really old Victorian photographs. You know, if you can imagine those photographs that we've seen where the bonnets really stick forward on the face. That's what the lady's describing there. Excuse me. When Florence rode on horseback, her habit was so long that it nearly touched the ground. That is, if she followed the fashion of the day, but I should not wonder a bit if she and her mother were too sensible. And she wore a round, broad-brimmed hat with long ostrich feathers. I remember a picture of the Princess Royal in a costume like this, which I thought one of the most beautiful things that I ever saw. So I shall imagine Florence on an afternoon ride with the squire, let us say dressed in this way, when scampering about on her pony, although I trust she wore a much less cumbrous costume. Cumbrous means cumbersome, so less heavy and in the way kind of outfit. You will remember that the Nightingale spent the winter at Embley Park in Hampshire. Remember, at this point they have 3 houses. Here too, Florence was busy in good and helpful work. At Christmas time, she found her best pleasure in giving presents to young and old among the poor people about her, in getting up entertainments for children, training them to sing, arranging treats for the old people in the poorhouse. On Christmas Eve, the village carol singers would come and sing on the lawn. Old English carols that had been sung by generation after generation. Poor Anthony Babington over at Lee Hall may have listened on Christmas Eve to the same old sweet song. Oh, no, 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 no. Who wants me to sing to you again? As Joseph was a-walking, he heard an angel sing, "This night shall be the birth night of Christ our heavenly King. His birthbed shall be neither in house and nor in hall, nor in the place of paradise, but in the oxen stall. He neither shall be rocked in silver nor in gold, but in the wooden manger that lieth in the mould. He neither shall be washen with white wine nor with red, but with the fair spring water that on you shall be shed. He neither shall be clothed in purple nor in pall, but in the fair white linen that use in babies all. As Joseph was a-walking, thus did the angel sing, and Mary's son at midnight was born to be our King." Excuse me. "Then be you glad, good people, at this time of your year, and light you up your candles, for his star it shineth clear." That went completely out of tune. Then, who's so glad as Florence to call the singers in and bid them welcome and Merry Christmas, and in aid in distributing the mince pies and silver coins which were always their due. When Florence was fairly grown up and other things came into her life, the gay and merry things that come to so many girls, Mr. Nightingale was a man of wealth and position, and he liked his wife and daughters to have their share in the gaieties of the counties. So there were many parties at Embley and elsewhere, and Florence danced as gaily, I doubt not, as the other girls. She went to London too, and so she and her sister were presented to Queen Victoria and had their share of the brilliant society of the time. But much as she may have enjoyed all of this for a time, still her heart was not in it, and she tired as soon of dancing and dressing and visiting people. Already her mind was turning to other things. Already her eyes were clearly looking forward to other ways of life and other methods of work. And we're going to leave that today so you can get over my singing. And tomorrow we will look at what she did next in chapter 4. Have a lovely day. Bye.